Okay. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's live stream. We're glad you're here.
We certainly are. We're back for our second week of Louis Zamperini. Whew, we finished it ourselves. I must say it gets a little faster as you read through, doesn't it? Because you certainly want to make sure he comes out alive.
Oh, yeah.
So let us know if you're here and say hi on the chat if you're here.
Yeah.
So that we can know you're here. Otherwise, we'll just chat along and people can join us as they will. So I guess the first thing that we're thinking about is this whole idea of heroes and what makes a person a hero. And, we've written 82 of these books. So we've thought a lot about what actually does make someone a hero as opposed to somebody who just endured a lot or somebody who had a lot go wrong. And I think Louis Zamperini is a really good example of what makes a hero. Hi. Wow, we've got Laurel from Africa. Hi. Good to see you again. I think one of the things, and we've got on, hi Hannah, good to see you. Let us know, what part you found the most moving in the second half of the story, if you've got a moment to type it in. Because we haven't read his story for many years. And I must say, reading through it, rather than writing it, it's incredibly harrowing. And I guess I was struck by all the different kinds of obstacles that he had to overcome. He's on the raft and he's got the sharks, which is enough for most people.
Oh, yeah.
And he's got he's being shot at, which is again a lot. And he's had a bomb dropped on him. And he's escaped all of the spaghetti wiring from a crash in the ocean with the plane. So, I mean, he endures the most incredibly difficult things, and then he nearly starves, he nearly dies of thirst, and then he gets to land, and it's kind of a different kind of thing that to have a physical situation like a shark wanting to attack you or not having enough water or someone eating your chocolates. But it's quite another thing to have a psychological warfare waged against you with someone like the bird who, did unpredictable and truly awful, inhumane things to other people, and then to watch your rations being eaten by the guards and things like that, and knowing that you're not being given the Geneva Convention things that you're entitled to. That's a different kind of stress that you're under, as opposed to just, not just, but just the sharks and the hunger and things like that. And I'm wondering, which do you think would be more difficult to endure? Is it more difficult to endure physical hardship, or is it more difficult to endure what people are capable of doing to each other sometimes?
Yeah.
What do you think, Geoff?
It's a challenge. And I think war puts people in, and and all the other things that go with war of displaced people, etc., puts people in a situation that I guess tests their mettle and calls for them to sometimes do things to survive that they maybe fear, that don't want to do or anything. I can't say that I want to jump in and swim with sharks or fend them off, or but were I out there on that raft, that's a whole different context. And so, yeah, you measure by people, I guess, by what they do, and some people would freeze up, others, and as we see, Louis here has the mental
Stamina, I
fortitude
guess.
and stamina to do. And of course, we know that he'd been trained to try and survive shark attacks, so he's putting some of those skills that he does have into that. But then just being stuck on a raft and suddenly running out of everything, or
I think one of the parts that I found, or just for his physical stuff, was when they got strafed. The raft got strafed by the Japanese airplane, and then it took them like 24 hours or something to repair all the holes. I mean, he certainly had the ability to keep going and just simply not give up. But think, well, there's not much chance this will work, but let's do it. Let's give it a try. And I think that's one of the things that he had more than Phil, and definitely more than Mac, who didn't make it, was this, like, let's push this, let's keep going, let's see what happens next. I mean, I think a lot of people, me included, would be like, oh, well, I know what's going to happen next. We're going to sink and the sharks are going to eat us. But somehow, even before he was a Christian, Louis was able to kind of put that aside and to really think positively and to move forward with a plan. And I think that is the thing. I think he did save the other two guys. I think without Louis, I very much doubt that either of them would have kept going long enough to, get to shore or get near shore. Because it's a lot to say, yes, I can see what is probably going to happen, but I'm also going to put that aside and do what I can to change the outcome. And
right.
Yeah, there's not a lot of people that really comes naturally to. But, I think last week we were all a bit aghast at Louis and his antics as a kid and all the trouble he got up to. But I think it also made him realize that you just keep going.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he grew up, he was a scrapper and, learned some tricks to survive. And I think that's exactly where now you're in this raft drifting in shark-infested waters. And it must have been somewhere in their minds, there's Japanese out here somewhere as well. And we're running out of water and food, and we're the only three, it appears, and in fact were, the only three who survived from the plane. And it was Louis' resilience in one sense, kind of resourcefulness, and I think, his mental capacity did keep all three of them alive until Mac couldn't go on. He
didn't have the same mindset.
Yeah. And so he and Phil made it out alive, and that was in large part due to Louis and his resourcefulness.
I think it was. And I think there's a lot of situations where some people can do it and some people give up. And I think most people would have given up somewhere in that whole scenario that Louis lived through. And I think it's very interesting that when I read back through it, I was struck with how he was interviewed as soon as, he got sort of free. And was rehabbed enough to be able to flown back to Hawaii. He got intercepted and interviewed, and I wonder how that changed his life because, I kind of did a little bit of research on Phil afterwards, and Phil went back, he married his sweetheart, and he had wanted to be a science teacher, and he became a science teacher in a middle school, and he lived a very quiet life. He never spoke about his experience. And when it started coming out, the Zamperini book and things came out, people were very shocked to find that his background had included, eating shark's liver on a boat for 47 days. He never spoke of it. And I wonder, even if Louis would have spoken of it, if he hadn't been asked so soon afterwards, then it had become such kind of public knowledge that, he had a lot of questions to answer, and then he kept answering them. And then when he got saved, and then he was straight up on the stage answering, questions and talking about his experiences. And I wonder if that isn't something that really did help him as well. And if he hadn't done that for a year or two, if he would have really been able to get up and talk about all those things too. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the people who survive wars, I think I mentioned last week, my grandfather was in the First World War and survived that experience, but he would never talk about it. And most of the returning people, and when I was a kid growing up, there were lots and lots and lots of people who had survived World War II and many things, but most of them didn't want to talk about it. They just wanted to go on with their lives and bury that away inside their mind. For Louis, I think his fame going into this is what sort of thrust him into the limelight as soon as the war ended, and they found him on the streets of, was it Yokohama, and of course everybody thought he was dead, but he's alive, and so all of this thrust him into the forefront of things. And I think the truth of the matter is that he came back alive, and we confer people who go off and fight or do things, especially, for civically, for their country or whatever. We honor them if they come back alive, and we call them heroes. And I think what we see here, because we spend a lot of time analyzing what makes a hero, and Louis came back and was lauded a hero, and became the face, I think, for a lot of people. Because of his fame, people wanted to see what had happened to this former famous Olympian. And so he came back and he got the moniker hero, but he wasn't a whole person. When he stepped off that plane back in the US, I mean, he knew it. When he's there with his family and glad to be there, but then they pull out the record and he just breaks and asks them to break the record, because for him, the memory that record had brought to his parents, and the hope, and that yes, my Louis is alive. To Louis, we touched on some of the struggles and how he was feeling manipulated and all of those things, and it brought back all of the feelings that he was dealing with at that time. And those feelings are there for him, and that's the thing. So we call him a hero, but then we ask, well, what really makes a hero? What makes, like we've done with Lillian Trasher, what makes her a hero? Or some of you may have read Gladys Aylward and other people in this series. Why do we laud them as heroes? And and
I think that one of the things is, we used Angela, the book Unbroken, which is the modern day telling. We have the two older versions of Devil at My Heels. And then we have Unbroken, which was the really famous book that was written about him, when he was old. And as we use that for a lot of our research, but we use some other things too. One thing that we did use quite a lot was this DVD from the Billy Graham Crusade. It's 90 minutes and it's on his life. So we got a lot of information out of that. But one thing that we really found difficult with the book Unbroken is the name, because the name says unbroken. He wasn't broken, but actually he was broken in every single way that you could be broken. He was an absolute mess. He couldn't sleep. He turned to alcohol. He was not, a good husband. He wanted to be a good dad, but he couldn't be a good dad. He was haunted by his memories. So I find that calling a book about him Unbroken is, I really don't like the title, and I don't think that it fits. I think it kind of plays into that idea that if he came back with his body intact, that he was unbroken, but he wasn't. He was an incredibly broken man, and I think the thing that we enjoyed in our story is that we were able to spend more time telling what happened afterwards. Unbroken kind of ends when he gets back as a whole human being and hugs his parents. But then there's this whole devolving of his life because, we call it PTSD now, post-traumatic stress syndrome. People who have seen truly, truly horrible things have a hard job getting them out of their heads and just saying, oh, that's going to be in the past. That's not how it works in our brains. Our brains keep bringing it up and up and up. And so he was very, very broken. And if he hadn't gone to that Billy Graham crusade when he did and got saved, I think his marriage was over, and I would he have just ended up, on the streets somewhere as a homeless veteran, somebody who used to be somebody. I think that's probably, he didn't want to have a job. He got consumed with hate. He wanted revenge. He wanted to get rich quick so he could go back and kill the bird. I mean, he was totally a broken human being. And so one of the things about our book, I hope it shows, is that it really wasn't just time that healed him, and it wasn't just positive thinking, and it wasn't just trying to put the past behind him, but that he really, had a life-changing encounter at the Billy Graham crusade.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing and as soon as we read that book and we began to delve into Louis' story, realized it's kind of odd that this was called that particular name, Unbroken. But as I was saying before, it fits the kind of model or mold that we have for people who come back from wars like this. We assign them heroes, and of course, for Louis, he was well-known. He was kind of famous for his Olympic antics, etc. before that. So he ends up here. But one of the things I think as we read Unbroken is the author of the book doesn't really get religion, the place that religion and faith in God and some kind of relationship to religion plays, and the power that has in a person's life. And so when Louis gets home, kind of her telling of the book is done. She has created this kind of civic hero retelling of it, but Louis is anything but whole and a hero. And I think that was one of the things that also made us want to write the story, is to correct that, because we did know that after he got back, after he has his conversion, all of those people that with his youth organization that he starts right through to the end of his life, then became the beneficiaries of all the experiences that Louis had gone through. So it was more than surviving. It was him then that they opened the door for him to pour his heart and soul into other, young people, in the hope that they would not necessarily go down some of the same paths that he'd been.
Yeah, so it was very interesting. We have a couple of things here. Lauren says, so many years of nightmares for Louis, but then he was complete healing from God of his trauma and his hate. Yes, I think Louis really demonstrated that. I think he was eager to go to Japan and to meet, the people who had been so cruel to him, because I think you can say, oh yeah, I forgive someone, but when you are standing in front of them, that's a whole different matter. And actually I found a couple of pictures that I thought might be interesting for you. There's one here in this very old book, but here it is. And if you can see that, that's a picture of him with an interpreter talking to, remember, the guards who are now in the prison with...
on his first trip back to
yeah.
Japan.
So he's there, and that's where it really... things really, come real, don't they? When you can say, oh yeah, I forgive someone, or yeah, I'm over that. But when you put back in that situation, as he was right there in that photo, that's where you find out if you've really forgiven them, or if you're just trying hard to forgive them. And so I think it's, we called our book Redemption, not Unbroken, because we think he was very, very broken, but that God did redeem him. And Malachi says when he got saved, at least he had a wife who got saved before him. I would agree with you, Malachi. I think he needed help, didn't he? He needed a partner, and he needed someone who believed in him, who said, okay, we're going to do this together. And, she could have had him go and get a job, but she was supportive of him being with the Billy Graham crusades, and I think she certainly supported him till the time she died. And there's a really nice picture of her soon after they were married. So there's a picture of her. She was very beautiful. We found out a little bit more now. You can find a little bit more. Her father was a TV actor. He also was a executive in J.R. Reynolds, what was that, cigarette company, tobacco company, and he also imported wine and champagne. So someone asked, somebody emailed and asked if he got on with her parents. I actually don't know the answer to that. I hope so. I think probably in the end they sorted things out, but not a natural match here. I mean, you've got Louis, who's a very, very poor, child of immigrants, scrappy little dude, grew up in a house by a railway track. She grew up in Miami. Her father was quite a well-known actor. He actually was an actor in a couple of the
TV series we grew up with as kids.
Wow.
General Ben and Flipper.
Flipper. So they were both set in Florida.
The sheriff in which one was it? And he was the doctor in
He was the doctor in Gentle Ben and the sheriff in Flipper. So those were two TV series that made it all the way to New Zealand in the 1960s. We can still sing the theme songs, but we won't. And her dad was in those, and so they ran in very, very different circles. Right, so
and he was in some other murder mystery.
Emma's for murder or something. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know how that ended up. It doesn't say in the books, but I'm hopeful. I think that Louis was an incredibly forgiving person and incredibly endearing and loving, and I think he would have kept trying, and I'm hoping it worked out. I think it probably did. Emma says that God was definitely watching over Louis, because in the crash he was stuck and he passed out, and when he came to, he was loose from the wires. Yeah, that is very extraordinary, and I think that must have come back to him many, many times. Because there was 11 people on that plane, and only 3 of them got to the surface, and then of those 3, only 2 got to land. So yeah, quite extraordinary. Noah says, hi Noah, Louis really proved the limits of human survival. His personality was stubborn, which helped him survive. Interesting how important a positive mindset change is surviving. Absolutely. I mean, there are some people who, are able to hold on better than others. I did some more research on Phil too, and Phil had a much easier time of it. In the end, after they separated from each other, Phil went to some of the POW camps in Japan were better than the others, because some of them, was kind of show camps and had inspectors and things like that. And he was in one of those. So he said he got 3 meals a day, and he came back in relatively good shape, which certainly Louis didn't. So, yeah. Cherishing sparrows, God truly healed him in an amazing way. I would agree. It's quite extraordinary to really have that kind of transformation. And of course, he had, he was elevated straight to talking about his story and his testimony, but he also had people like Billy Graham and Cliff Burrows around him who could mentor him and understood what he'd been through. And I think that must have been a tremendous help to him as well. He had some very strong mentors who were watching out for him and praying with him and helping him.
Oh, yeah.
And Laurel says, amazing the work God did in his heart, that he could face his trauma head on and stand there in those prisons against the face those who beat and abused him. An incredible moment. Yes, and he reached out to the bird. He had thought the bird had died, had killed himself, but found out later that the bird had actually hidden out in the mountains of Japan for 7 years, and that by the time he had been found, they were sort of, it was 1952, they were sort of over prosecuting people, even though he'd been the 23rd most wanted man in Japan by the US government. He got by. He went on to live a normal life. He became a successful, ironically, life insurance salesman, and he died in his 80s. He refused to meet with Louis, and he did grant an interview, and in the interview he said he saw each of those men as an enemy of Japan, and he treated them as an enemy of Japan, and that he went beyond what was required of him as the commandant, and he did what he wanted to do to them. So he was just totally like, nah, that's how it went. And he never forgave. He never asked for forgiveness. He didn't see any need to be forgiven. But even at the Olympics, when Louis went back, he read a statement that he did forgive the bird. And so they had to leave it at there. Not everyone wants to be forgiven. So Laurel says, we're amazed he lived to 97 after those years of suffering. And even, I know, oh my gosh, being experimental. I mean, what was that green smoky liquid? I don't know. We don't know what it was. Nobody knows what it was. But
no, I remember, time and
but
time
I
again.
would, I mean, he had significant health issues. I mean, he was grown. He was a full-grown man, which it's not so bad as being a child with those things, but still he had beriberi, he had things that could affect his life, his heart and his liver and his lungs and all sorts of things. And I actually wrote down how long they lived. And
yes, he came from a family of strong genetics.
So his dad lived to 85 and his mom lived to 94, and Pete lived to 92. And his sister Sylvia lived to 90, and Virginia lived to 84. But, it is extraordinary that Louis outlived them all. And he was 97. So he actually lived, his mom was the next oldest, and she died at 94. So, and he was, very with it. He didn't have any kind of dementia or anything like that. He was very involved in the filming, and he was one of the advisors on the set, and he just was loving it all. So he died with all his faculties at 97 years old, which is an extraordinary thing after what he had been through. I would totally agree with you there.
Yeah, and as somebody noted, I think in a question they sent us, is like, wow, at 90 he's skiing and he's up on the roof with a chainsaw on a ladder. It's like,
Who was that? Yes, the Brown family, who have to watch it on a rewatch. But they said the children also thought it was amazing that Mr. Louis was climbing trees and snow skiing at the age of 90. Well, I think that's who he was. I mean, I wasn't doing those things at 20, so I don't think I'm going to be doing them at 90. But that was the kind of guy he was. He was wiry. He was physical. He loved to get out and do things. So, it is pretty extraordinary. I'm not sure his children thought it would be so hot for him to be up trees, but
Yes, I'm sure they were
Yeah.
like, Dad, get down now.
Nehemiah, who is 13 today. Happy birthday, Nehemiah. I had my birthday 2 days ago, so we're in the same birthday camp. I hope you're having a good day. Would like to know if it is known what happened to the flag Louis stole and then was given in Germany. I don't know. I would imagine that it is knowable because it's a big thing, a big deal. I'm imagining it's probably somewhere. Maybe it's at the camp or something. I'm not sure.
It is somewhere. I just read that recently.
Oh, did you?
It's
Maybe
on display
some
somewhere.
museum or something.
I'm not sure.
Well, yeah. And do you know if his Victory Boy camp is still going? I believe it is. And if you like, I can reach out and try to get an interview. I think his son Luke is still alive, and we could see what we can rustle up there, because that was Louis' life work, was taking troubled kids who were restless, boys who were restless, and really getting them out into nature, giving them something to do, and also telling them the gospel, and kind of training their minds. So that was his life's work, and I'd be happy to reach out and see if we can't rustle a few trees and find out a bit about that. So who else did we find out about? His brother Pete got married, and he had 2 sons and a daughter. So there's also a lovely photo that I really liked of Pete and his brother when they got back from. This is just after Louis is married. And you can still see he's very, very thin there. Of course, his brother's the one in the naval uniform. But I guess his parents were incredibly proud of them, and probably never thought they'd see a photo like that. So that was pretty special.
Yeah.
So Laurel says that's fun. All right, well I'll see what I can rustle up there. Yes. We also imagine the survival kits and military lifeguards today. I don't know. I mean, if he had only known, he would have grabbed a knife from the canteen before he went off, wouldn't he? And I imagine that a lot of people do carry their own personal gear on them, because the devastation of that. But I mean, to take the mirror and to break off the pieces with the pliers and get a sharp edge on it. That was pretty smart. But a knife would, and also I think a net, a nice fishing net. All those little pilot fish that followed the sharks around. You could easily have got one of those with a net if you had one. But
right, and I'm sure they have a whole lot of better things in there. But of course, what they have now that they didn't have then is we have satellites in space that can track, and all of these rafts and stuff now have automatic beacons that as soon as they're deployed start sending out a signal, say, hey, we're here, so they can be tracked and found. None of that existed at the time of the Second World War and when they're shot down. So I guess that and I'm sure maybe they interviewed Louis and some other survivors, say, hey, what else did we need to put in there to make it a little better for you? But
what were we missing?
Yeah, because somebody like, oh, if I was here, I need this and this. And like, hey, but how are you going to catch the fish? How are you going to cut them? How are you going to do all of these interesting things? And what about eating the... catching and eating the terrible albatross?
I wondered why the second one was better than the first one, if they'd just sort of given up and thought that it was better, or if really maybe a male albatross tastes different to a female one, or an old one or a young one. I don't know. There's a lot going on there in albatross land.
Depends what they may have been eating. Yes. Okay.
There's a lot. And
or the shark's liver, when you got the shark and you're eating this raw liver, or when they were draining it in the blood into max.
People might be having lunch.
Anyway.
But anyway, we wrote about it. We did write about it. And I think for as far as the writing goes, one of the big challenges with Louis' book was so much of it does take place on the raft. Probably half the book is on this very small raft, probably the size of your kitchen table, with starts off with two other people, and then he's overboard and there's only one man left. And it can be very challenging, to write a book like that, because books are much easier when they're in different places, because it gives the reader somewhere to go. Like, now we're at the beach, now we're on a ship, now we're on an airplane. I mean, that's kind of movement makes the reader keep reading a lot of times. So when you are stuck for 47 days on a raft, what is changing? The time of day is changing, the weather's changing, the health of the one or two people on board with you are changing, how many sharks in the water are changing. But that's not a lot to sustain like half a book. So that makes it, as a writer, quite a daunting task. We faced that with Dan Bauman's book.
And I was just thinking, that the great challenge of a man in Evin prison, which is the worst prison in Iran, in solitary confinement for days after days, and not knowing whether he was going to be executed. He's American. Well, he's a Swiss American, and he's in prison for coming into Iran and sharing the gospel. So that was the challenge we faced there. Is like he had invented this game where he'd roll his underpants into a ball and somehow made little things to knock down with it, and that was
like a pinball machine.
Which I guess you do to try and keep your mind active.
But like 20 days into that, I mean...
even he got bored with it. But,
so it's very challenging to set a lot of a book in one small space. And
the title of that book is called Cell 58. Cell 58. So most of it takes place in Cell 58.
And it does remind me, there's a lot of similarities between those two books, but that one is more for an adult audience. But a lot of the same things happened to both of them. And, that combination of physical distress and then psychological distress when other people make it hard for you by, hitting you and taking things away from you and taunting you and things like that.
I mean, there's a lot of parallels between Dan's story and the things that he went through, and that changed his life, changed his ministry, and all sorts of interesting things as a result of that time.
Right. So I'm sure that you've figured out by now that Lillian Treasure and Louis Zamperini are two very different stories. Very different. But it was actually quite a lot of fun to write Louis' story, because apart from the time on the raft, there was a lot happening. And it's interesting to try to tell the story of a world war through one person's eyes. I always find that challenging, interesting. There's a few other books if you're interested in learning more about the war in Japan, particularly. We wrote a book on Douglas MacArthur, who was the general in charge of that sphere of the war. We did one on Jake DeShazer, which I think Jake and Louis are very similar personalities.
Stories, similar and a similar story.
And they both ended up in Japan, and Jake actually had quite similar experiences, and he ended up going back.
Both involved airplanes.
And Jake went back as a missionary.
Which is interesting because, Jake went back to Japan as a missionary after being a POW. In China, both with under the Japanese control, and I think one of the reading back through a book after it was published 12 years ago, when I hadn't really read it again, I think that the greatest embodiment of the story is when Jake is running, Louis is running through the city of where he had been held prisoner, holding the Olympic torch, and to all these Japanese people who are there, he's also a hero.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. And I
mean,
thought like, wow. Yeah. That's why he is a hero.
Yeah. That is really a wonderful opportunity that he had. And we also did one other book that might be interesting to you if you're into it, is the Billy Graham book, which does mention, and I think that's how we first heard about
Yeah,
Louis
I think we told
Zamperini.
you last week. Yeah, that's how we had heard when we were researching for that. When we wrote the book, actually, just before we did Louis' book, and then heard about this guy, this war hero, and so we looked into it, and we found the books that we had here, and those resources were available, but we didn't feel like there was enough that we needed perspective, and that's when Unbroken came out, and she did a fabulous job digging up the material and setting it in order. She really did. And so that helped us, or gave us a lot more insight and a lot more avenues to follow up and aspects of the story.
But then, of course, it's in the Christian Hero series. So we were like, okay, what happens afterwards? How does this actually end? It doesn't actually end when he comes home, because he brings himself and his situation inside his head, and all his stuff home with him. So it was a different kind of a book.
Right.
Noah says that he enjoyed the story more. That's great, Noah. I know we have some stories that appeal to younger kids, some that tend to appeal to girls more, some that appeal to guys. But sometimes people think that the girls' stories are for the girls and the boys' stories are for the boys. And I'm like, I don't think so.
No.
Because some of these women, some of the things that they endure and how tough they are would leave most men in the dust.
Yeah, that was when we were writing the Gladys Aylward book. It was like in the first 4 books that we wrote, and I remember writing I remember writing about her walking back in the middle of the night through the Siberian forest from the
train
from the battlefront with her stuff on her back, and we know there's wolves, there's all these dangerous things out there. It's cold, it's snowing, and she's just walking down the railway line, and I'm like, I don't think I could even do that.
Well, it's the same kind of thing with Louis, isn't it? I mean, it's like common sense tells you that you've got a good chance. You could easily freeze to death. You could be mauled by wolves, or you could be shot. But in spite of all that, Gladys was like, well, let's get going and see what happens. And Louis had a lot of the same attitude. Well, let's get going. I mean, jump in that water with the sharks rather than being, shot at from the air. Let's see what happens. And that's a mindset that not everybody can manage. And you read Gladys Aylward too. Yeah, that's one of our favorites.
It's a great story.
Well, does anyone have any more questions or comments today? Or are we ready to get on to our next book, which we are very excited about? It's because this is somebody that we know and love.
Klaus. He's become a great friend.
And a wonderful man.
But just, what he has achieved
is really something.
Yeah, and we'll go into some of the things that he's achieved beyond where the story ends. Klaus has already taped a little follow-up to fill you in. So sometime, probably towards the end of next week, I'll post that. We'll let you know when that comes up on our YouTube channel. But it's great, yeah.
And Klaus again, I mean, he's well, as you read it, you'll find out he's pretty fearless, and that he's doing something that most people say, don't even try. It's not going to happen. It's not. Come on, get real.
I know.
But Klaus, you're going to love this. We're very excited to talk to you about this. And
from the moment we met Klaus, we passed through a hotel, and he was staying here, and our publisher wanted us to meet him, and so we met him. Within 3 minutes, we're sitting down at his computer, and he's got this presentation on the work that he's doing in Peru.
We're in it.
We're like, okay, it's
no
like
small talk.
Never a question. You're not going to write my book. No, it's like
here's chapter 1.
Yeah. There was another time. Remember, we were seated in the baggage claim at Orlando International Airport with Klaus with this thing, and we were interviewing him, and he was pitching us on the latest thing he was doing.
So he's a whole different person, and I think that's why we chose these 3 books for our first summer read aloud. Is they are very different people, but God used them all in very unique ways, and really changed a lot of other people's lives through them, and continues to today. So we will say farewell to you today.
Some more questions, we will. And so if you haven't finished Louis, finish it and hop into Klaus. I know you're going to enjoy his book.
So Nehemiah wants to know why the Japanese plane attacked the raft. He thinks they surely were on a different mission, and why waste ammunition on the raft?
Oh, that was that question came up last time. Yeah. The reason that they fired at this one, because they mistook it for a B-24 American bomber.
Right, that's why they sent the flare up.
Yeah, that's why they sent the flare up.
But why did the Japanese bother?
Because you were out there, and
they were survivors. I mean,
of course, remember, like Jimmy, which somebody actually asked us about in one of the questions. There were Japanese living in the U.S., and he is a friend had befriended Jake. So like, hey, there's this
Louis.
Louis, sorry. There's this famous Olympian floating around in the ocean somewhere. Well, that then becomes a kind of trophy for the enemy, or the Japanese in this case, if they somehow do capture and kill him. And
even if they didn't know which was him, which they probably didn't, I mean, they would know their own rafts from American rafts. And I think that a lot of times, there's conventions about what you should do if you see an enemy raft floating or enemy people. You should pick them up and, offer first aid. But in a wartime, that doesn't always work out. And I think people get frustrated. They just want to do what they want to do, and they wanted to make sure that the people in that raft were dead. Right. And they tried their hardest, and it is really quite remarkable that for all the bullets, I mean, not one even hit them. I mean, and that is quite remarkable.
Well, I think what's even more remarkable is the way that Louis had to patch all the holes in those rafts so they could keep it afloat.
And you think about it, and I will end here, but I tend to think in a raft, and you think of a nice flat surface, and you're just kind of floating along, looking at the sharks, whatever. But I mean, these were some of the waves were 20 feet high. I mean, they had to work hard just to stay in the raft. I mean, that's a lot. But yep. Louis made it through, and then he, thought his worst was over, and it was only just beginning, wasn't it?
It was indeed, but that's, yeah.
Well, we will see you all next week. It's lovely to catch up with you again this Friday. We'll see you next Friday. And Hannah,
Yep.
thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for reading our books. And thank you for, asking questions and thinking a little more deeply about them. And yeah, we appreciate you.
And remember, anyone who's watching it on the replay, if you have questions and you can't be on the live, you can send your question to inquiry@bengebooks.com.
All right.
And we'll get it and try and do our best to answer the question for you.
So we've gone from Egypt to Japan, and we'll see you next week in Peru.
All right, folks.
Bye.
Bye.